How's it going, everyone? And welcome to Animal Talk Podcast with me, Ryan Ferguson.
And me, Ayrton King.
Hi, Ayrton. How's it going?
I'm doing really good. How are you?
I'm doing so well, thank you. And I'm sort of on a little bit of a high because actually just before we recorded this, we had another interview on a different podcast.
I know. It was really, really awesome. And again, amazing getting to connect with like-minded people. So yeah, that was really amazing. I'm really proud that we got to feature on there.
Yeah, so you guys will be able to hear this podcast very soon. It's coming out probably before this podcast. So you guys will probably be able to listen to it. It's with the NAI team from Natural Encounters Inc. on their Tech Talk podcast. And we really had an awesome conversation with them on their podcast. And I think we're on a little bit of a high about that. So we decided to do our podcast and chat to you guys about another really important topic. What's that topic, Ayrton?
The topic that we're going to be chatting today is the value of trust.
Yeah, trust, very important, especially when you're working with any animal species. It's building that trust and that bond relationship with that animal so that it trusts you and trust it.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I think a lot of people always think it's in animal training and, in a show or a presentation environment when you mention that you have to trust the animal in the sense of trust that the animal is going to perform for you so that your ego doesn't get bruised. But it's not only about that. It's also about when you're working with animals that are actually quite dangerous and somebody can get harmed if you're doing a training session with them. You've got to have a really good relationship with that animal and enough trust. And as you said, Ryan, it's a two-way street.
Yeah, it's so important. And how I've been trained and taught over the years dealing with trust is ensuring that you build as much trust as you possibly can. And it's always been explained in a really cool way, and that is like it's a bank account. So you've got this trust bank account that every time you do something positive with the animal, you are making a deposit of trust into that account. So every positive experience that the animal experience or encounter with you during a training session or not in a training session, everything that's positive goes into that trust account. And the reason why you want to build that trust account as big as possible is if ever you have to take a withdrawal, so you need to take money out of that account, so take that trust out of that account, you don't want to be left with only a small amount of trust. You want to be left with quite a large amount of trust so that you can build off of that again. So an example would be if you have, I'm going to go with birds because again, I do birds, you're probably going to decide it's a fish.
And of course.
What would happen is I would be training a bird and adding a lot of positive experiences with that bird. But then 3 weeks down the line, there's something wrong. It's got a wound on its toe and that needs to be treated. And the only way to treat it is to catch it up because it's quite a large wound and it needs immediate attention. Now, catching that bird up and not having the time to train the bird to allow me to treat the foot pretty much takes trust out of that account because catching it up is a negative experience. It's a very negative experience, catching the bird, putting it in a towel, holding it, covering its eyes, making sure that you treat the wound. That's a lot going on. So that's taking trust out of the account. Now it's not going to trust me. But because I've added a lot of trust in the past weeks, it will take time to get the bird to trust me again, but it's a shorter period of time that the bird will trust me again, rather than only having a small amount of trust originally, and then when I take a whole lot of trust out of the account, I break the bank, and then I'm in the rears. And then I don't have enough trust, and then it's going to take me a lot longer to build that trust up.
Ryan, when you mention this is also how trust was taught to me, and it is really just, I think it's an amazing example when you think of it as this, almost like this account system. And it just really puts it into perspective. For me, you're right, I'm going to link it directly back to fish. Because that's what I do. And
I knew it.
one really good example I have is a few years ago when I first started working at the aquarium, we would sometimes periodically we would get big ocean sunfish that would be brought in because they got stuck in the dry dock or in the harbor. And not only were they part of a research project, but also they would then be moved onto exhibit for a short period while we would just monitor them to make sure that they were okay, and then they would be released. And during that time, I was very privileged to be part of one of the teams that got to actually target train the sunfish. And why I'm linking this story to the trust topic is because the sunfish, often they come in with all these big parasites on. And sometimes it can be really, really stressful because you want to try and remove them. But the only way to remove them is quite often to put the animal into a stretcher or to hold it firmly while another staff member takes the parasites off with the tweezer. And it can be extremely stressful for those animals. And some of the ones that I got to work with, because they were target trained and they had such a positive relationship with the target and with me as like one of the primary trainers working with them, over, I would say a few days, we managed to actually target train them to come up to the side of the exhibit with their target. And then it was very easy for us to actually then take the parasites off from the side without even having to hold the fish, which was really amazing because it just showed that there was such a positive association and a lot of trust in what we were doing during that target training session, that it didn't actually, maybe it did mind us picking the parasites off, but it wasn't as negative because there was such a positive association with the target and with the training sessions. And we have a similar thing with the stingrays. We have a medical pool area that has a door, and when we need to do medical behaviors, obviously we practice bringing the stingrays into the medical pool on target and then trying to, keep that space really positive. So I think what I'm trying to lead to with this is not only can you have a positive trust account with an animal, but you in a certain space can also have a positive trust account. So we keep the medical pool as a really positive space for the stingrays. We bring them in there. During their training sessions, we reinforce them with lots of things that they enjoy, whether it's scratches or food, so that when it does come to a time where we need to do a health check and we have to actually bring them into the medical pool and eventually they desensitize to the door, we have to close the door and then do a procedure there, like an ultrasound or weighing session. That negative experience that they're having doesn't actually outweigh all the positive experiences they've had because that trust account is so well built up.
Yeah, I think it's also the same sort of concept as crate training and allowing, and I think we discussed this with Gabby in brief in one of our other podcasts, but it's about the animal having that choice, which is choice and control, which we spoke about, that it trusts when it goes into the crate. And this is another, I'm going to use a bird as an example. I was busy training a young chicken to crate, and all I did was leave the crate on the ground and have some of his really cool treats and just watch him for behaviors. And chickens, being curious and inquisitive, he immediately went to the crate door to see what's going on and was looking inside. And I'd drop a small piece of his favorite food in the back and he'd see it and he'd run forward, grab it, but then run straight out because it's a dark little section of area that he's not sure about. And I was like, okay, maybe I moved a little bit too quickly. So let me drop it further to the front of the crate. So I dropped a piece and he would grab it and pull his head back. So then I thought, well, let me not reinforce him. Let him try and experience a little bit more. So he kind of went in there and experienced a bit more and started putting his head further and further in. I actually didn't have to do any of those reinforcers during that time because he was just experiencing on his own. And because there was no door on the crate or anything kind of moving around or the crate moving, he felt very positive about the experience he was having. And that crate was now building trust with him. And he was trusting that that crate wasn't going to have a problem, if that makes sense. So it was really important for him to build his own trust with the crate. And then when you allow the animal to have a choice in the crate, and that is when the door is on, If they look at the door must be open. If they part at the back of the crate and they stay there, you can then slowly close the door. But as soon as they look back at the door, you open it. They're choosing for that door to open. And they're trusting that every time they look back, they will then have the door open.
That's amazing.
And eventually, they take away that idea of, I'm going to look at the door, because they're like, let me just focus on you and focus on this, because I know that if I do have the choice to look back at that door, you will open it. And if you keep that trust with that crate, I never had a problem with the chicken ever not crating. Every time I put the crate down and opened the door, he ran straight into the crate and would stare at the back of the crate going, you can close the door now. And I'd close the door and move him. So yes, it's really important for the animal to trust the crate and to trust you that you will open the crate if they look back at that door. And as you go through your training, those sort of behaviors change a little bit, because it can't look at the door while you're moving the crate, because you're not going to be able to open the door while you're moving the crate. So once you've put the crate down, then they can then look at the door, and you would open the door because it's safe for them to go out. So that's really important, that you put them in the safe situation. They trust that you will open the door when they look at it in a safe situation for them to leave the crate.
So, Ryan, I've actually got a great story that kind of goes with a crate and a bird and training. So I think I need to share that one with you. I don't know if I've shared.
What? It's a bird, not a fish?
Keeping in mind, I worked with penguins for quite a few years. So in the penguin exhibit, right, we used to actually have quite a few free flying bird species. So we used to have oyster catchers, we had moorhens, because that particular exhibit we wanted to almost create like it's an ecosystem with lots of different species. And I decided that I wanted to start crate training the African black oyster catcher that lived on the penguin beach. Her name was Rita. I had formed a really good bond with her, getting her to come over to the one rockwork on the side, the rockwork formation, and feeding her different things like limpets and mealworms. And for quite a few months, we really built up a really good relationship, with me being able to signal her to come over to the feeding station and then giving her food. So I was quite confident that I could get Rita to go into a crate. So I managed to get a decent sized, almost like a cat transport crate, that you would use for a dog as well. And I was like, this is what I'm going to use for Rita. And Rita's personality, she was, quite shy, but she was also quite inquisitive. So I had good, faith that she was probably going to go and explore this box as soon as it goes onto the exhibit. For any of you that have been to the aquarium and you've seen the penguin exhibits, it's basically rockwork, and then there's a water channel, and then the main penguin beach where the penguins are. And Rita in particular, she liked to spend a lot of time on the African penguin beach. So I put the crate onto the penguin beach, and I opened the door, and I put some nice food in front of it and also in the crate. And Rita would always sit on top of this high rock structure that we have. We call it the cave, and she would sit up there. And whenever we would feed, she would fly very beautifully from there down onto the beach. And I stepped off the beach. I left the crate. Rita flew down. She picked up some of the mealworms. She investigated the crate from the outside first. She then went inside. And I was really, really just so impressed and happy. But that was shortened when one of the African penguins became inquisitive by going over to the crate and proceeded to push the door closed.
No.
And Rita was now in the crate. And of course, she hadn't had a very positive relationship built with that crate because it was something that was brand new. Looking back at it now, I was like, I should have actually just removed the door for starters so that nothing like that could happen.
That is such a good point. I think a lot of people need to remember that when crate training. The best thing to do, because those crates that you're talking about have those swinging doors, the
Yeah.
best thing to do to ensure that you get a positive experience with the crate is
Take
just
the
take
door
the
off.
door off. You're not going to use it for a while, so just take it off. And something that we did to stop also that is we redesigned our crates. We made sliding doors. So depending on where we were going to use the crates, they either slid from the side or they slid from the top. So we just changed the swing doors to sliding doors, and you have a lot more control over those doors, and there's less chance of negative experiences happening when that door just closes on its own.
Yeah. And I mean, from that situation, I really learned that even though that situation happened, I think it did help that obviously I wasn't the one closing her in the crate, and I wasn't near her when that occurred. So that negative experience was only really associated with the crate and not really me. So she would still fly down and come over to the feeding station and feed from me. But it took quite a few months. And what I actually had to do was I had to deconstruct the crate. So I don't know, a lot of you will know those crates actually come apart. So you can take the lid off, the top half, and then there's a bottom half, and then the door that goes in the front. And we had to actually break down that behavior all the way to her just going into basically the empty bottom half of the crate, and then slowly but surely piecing it back together until she was comfortable. So yeah, that was just an interesting experience and a memory that I have.
Yeah, it's those small approximations sometimes that make the difference. Sometimes we move very quickly in our behaviors. Well, our brain starts moving quickly and the animal's a little bit behind.
Yeah.
And then it can actually go the other way around, where we are trying to do small approximations and the animal's like, come, hurry up.
Baby steps.
We're past this point. Can we just move on now, please? And I had that experience with a crow. So I was busy training a crow to do a box money collection at the end of the bird show. And we started...
That's one of my favorite behaviors I've seen. Just so you know.
It's awesome. I really love that behavior. It was such a cool behavior to train as well. And there's a lot of trust around that behavior, because you have to get, first of all, you have to get the bird used to the box that it has to sit on, which can be quite daunting because you can't really deconstruct the box. The box is how it is. We had a big perspex box, so you could see through it with two perches on it, with this big hole in the middle. And you know, you don't think about all of these things when you start training. But anyway, we put the box there and we got him used to jumping from our hand to the box, from our hand to the box and back, and hand to the box and back, so that we got the idea of just sitting on there, and then eventually getting him to sit and just reinforce him for sitting there. And then we started training the behavior. And how we trained the behavior was, how do you get a bird to distinguish a piece of paper and drop it into the hole? Well, you got to find something that kind of has an automatic bridge. And all we did was we took these metal washers and a metal bowl.
Oh, wow.
And we placed something in the box with a metal bowl close to where that opening is. And we trained the crow to take that washer. So as it would touch the washer with its beak, we would bridge with good and then reinforce. And then the bird would obviously start fiddling around with the washer. So the idea was to try and get the bird to put the washer in the bowl. And the sound of it hitting the bowl would be the bridge to give the reinforcer. However, we had thought a little bit too quickly, and the bird was just dropping it all over the top and on the floor and everything. So we had to go back a bit of a step, and we had to take the bowl, and this is where trainers and keepers have to contort their bodies in very weird positions to try and allow these behaviors to come to pass, because we needed a person working with the bird. We needed a person underneath the bird holding the bowl and watching that when it dropped that washer, they would have to move the bowl to try and catch the washer so that the bird would hear the plonk sound in the bowl for it to go, oh, I need to get it in the bowl. So that took a bit of time, but once the bird was doing a lot of reps of it dropping in that metal bowl, we were able to move the metal bowl back into the donation box that we had, and then the bird started dropping it into the bowl in the donation box through the gap that we had made. So we got a lot of reps like that, and we started lowering that bowl till it was like midway, and every time the bird would drop those washers into the bowl. Now, how do you move from that? Because now it's built a trust with every time it hears the ping sound that it's going to get a reinforcer, but we're not going to do coins. We're going to do paper money. So how are we going to do that now?
Yeah.
So now we decided, do one washer, one piece of paper, just a random piece of paper, because crows are very destructive. And that first touch of that paper, he's like, oh, let me just put it on my feet and rip it to pieces, which happened many times. And you did not want to do that to a 10 Rand or a 20 Rand note. So we used pieces of paper and let him get through that behavior. If he wants to rip it apart, let him rip it apart, but don't reinforce him for it. Eventually gets it, and he's got to just grab it and drop, grab it and drop. And you kind of do a piece of paper, a washer, a piece of paper, a washer. And then eventually you're just taking the washers away and it's just a piece of paper. And you slowly start introducing money, actual money, and he'll grab it and put it in. And then we were really excited. So we were like, okay, let's do this behavior. And I was like, no, wait, we need to fill the donation box a little bit with money so that it looks like there's a decent amount of money in there. People will come down, they see the money in there, and they'll come and offer the bird the money. And all that money was going to conservation. So we put quite a few notes in there, and the bird wouldn't go anywhere near the donation box. Why? Because he'd never seen money in the donation box before, and it's a clear donation box. So we had to take a few more steps back, because now the trust of going onto the donation box that was clear is not there anymore. So, yeah, very interesting steps that you have to sometimes go forward and move back and go forward and move back. But eventually we got the behavior, and all that would happen on stage is kids, adults would come down, show that crow the money right in front of him. He'll grab it and put it in the box. And he would do it extremely quick. That was really cool, because then people would go, oh, I missed it. I didn't get that on a photo or on a video. Can you do it again? And they'd give the kid another note. And they would start ending up using up all their notes and starting to get to those bigger notes. And we were just like, yes, more for conservation. Let's do this.
I think what I loved about that, because I was that person bringing down money to give to the crow, was just the fact that there was actually, like, for visitors, there was also a reinforcer of not only you are giving money and you know that it's going to go to a conservation that's going to help birds and different endangered species, but also the fact that you're getting to see this bird do such a cool behavior. So automatically you just want to give more money because it's reinforcing for us as well. So I think that was really, really cool.
I think it's also the interaction you get to experience. That close interaction with the bird, I think, is quite important for people as well. And it's just such a cool behavior. I mean, a lot of people might question it and say, is it not detrimental to the bird? It's getting dirty money. But crows in general, if you think about crow behavior, they are at rubbish dumps. They are all over the place where they're exposed to many, many things. And also, they're picking up things and moving things around, and they're doing a lot. They're very intelligent birds. And the one thing that we had to tell our guests is, please do not give a coin. Because what we learned is, over time, as soon as he got anything that was metal, he was looking for a metal bowl to put it in.
Okay.
So if he was given a coin, he would jump off the box and look for a metal bowl. And there was always a metal bowl at the presenter window. And there were a couple of times where he'd be like, oh, I'm going to put it in there. You go, bling. Oh, where's my reward? No, that's not what we're looking for. We want you to stay on the box. So paper money only. And it was just a really cool behavior. And we actually made quite a lot of money for conservation. It helped Volpro. It helped the Bullet Ground Hornbill project over the years. And it was all that one simple behavior in building trust with that bird, that we trusted it would be fine with the public up close. And also it trusted us, allowing people coming up to it, and also trusting that box. So all of that comes down to trust on both sides, which is so vitally important.
Yeah. I think, especially when you're talking to trainers, for example, in the marine mammal field, I mean, working with, like, when we chatted, with Gabby, for example, or anyone that's working with large marine mammals, everyone always often perceives them as these gentle giants, but you have to always remember how powerful those animals are. I mean, some of those animals, like if you talk about killer whales, for example, they are really apex predators. And in a captive environment, there's so much trust that goes into working with animals like that. And again, it's going back to what we're saying with having your accounts of trust and making sure that balance is always, in a positive, because when you're working with animals like that, you really have to not only know what you're doing, but always ensure that you have that positive relationship. The only thing, I haven't worked with mammals, but the only thing I can relate it to is when I'm working with our really big stingrays, because quite often, we used to work with a large short-tail stingray, and I could always remember when we would do feeds and certain things with him, he would be so excited about getting food that he would quite easily push you from one side of the exhibit all the way along the bottom to the other side because they're extremely powerful. It's always just having that, in the back of your mind, that respect for those animals, that they are so much more powerful and bigger than you are. And then also just ensuring that you're having that positive interaction, and every interaction that you do have with them, try and make it positive, try and make it something that builds onto that positive and trust account. I know with working now more with our honeycomb stingray, and something that we chatted about in the podcast we did earlier today, was with Honey, for example. Often she will come over during a feed, and she doesn't actually want food. She just wants to spend time with me, and that's something that I'm always forever thankful for. And it's those moments that really make you appreciate your job. But it's also like in that moment, it's really opportunities. Just stop what I'm doing, stop worrying about everything else that's going on, and just be present with that animal in that moment. And really just ensure that you have a positive interaction and a positive experience. And those moments all add to building onto that, that positive trust account.
I think that's such a great example with Honey, because Honey's doing it because her positive experience is just being with you.
Yeah.
Forget about the food. I mean, you even mentioned that if you offered her food, she'd just spit it out at you. I'm not really interested in that. Just having that positive experience with you becomes a reinforcer. And keeping that positive experience every time with you can go a long way to keeping behaviors and even increasing behaviors. You might even be able to do more things with her where you don't even have to use a positive reinforcer as a physical, but more just her just being around you and enjoying hanging out with you.
Yeah. No, it's amazing.
I think one of the things that also a lot of people get concerned about is they find that they can't get a behavior to happen, especially with animals that are more flock. Let's talk about birds, flock related, or animals that are more herd related, or in groups. I find, and I can't remember, this was chatted maybe about on the NEI podcasts in the past that I've listened to, but where if you bring in one of the other animals from its exhibit into the training session with it, and they both experience that same area or experience, they have a lot more confidence in going and experiencing things that you would like to be part of the training. So if you've got an animal that's struggling, I watched a program with giraffe and training giraffe. Most of the herd would go onto display. So a lot of places have got their back barn area, and then especially in places that are a lot colder, and then they have their outdoor plains area that they have to go into. And they normally have to go through quite a tight corridor and a couple of doors to get through there. And one of the young giraffe was petrified of going through. So there was no trust that something on the other side was positive. Now, how do you build that if it doesn't know what's on the other side? How are you going to get it to trust? And they were struggling because they were working with the giraffe as one. And it kept getting towards the door and then pulling away and saying, no, I'm too scared. And no, I'm too scared. And they were trying so many different things, using negative reinforcement behind the giraffe, pushing it, trying to get it through, trying to reinforce it when it moved closer to the door. One of the trainers was like, let's try and add the other giraffe into this training that are going through and see if she'll just go, all right, let me go. And they added a couple more of the giraffe, and the giraffe started walking closer to the door and walking through. And within a few minutes, she was out in the plains area because she just was like, oh, you guys are doing it. Looks safe. Let me go. And that's because she had trust with her fellow giraffe that were in the exhibit with her. But also, being in that situation and going, you guys are experiencing this. I can experience it too. I feel a lot more confident. And confidence is actually really, really important for our animals.
I think also what you mentioned there, what also I think to touch on with this is, knowing the natural history of your animals. Like for instance, you said with certain bird species, they used to being in a flock. Similar with the giraffes, they used to being in a a small herd, for example. So also just knowing the background of your animal and knowing, what out in the wild, what they would be, what kind of social structure they would have is also really important, because that can also give you some clues into what you might be missing in a training session, or what you can use, like you mentioned with the giraffes, adding another animal into that. I know, for example, with an example I can give you is the rockhopper penguins. Now the rockhopper penguins, they move from their one exhibit to, we have a different, it's a kelp forest exhibit. It's a 800,000 liter exhibit. It's 6 meters deep. So it's a much bigger water space for the rockhopper penguins to swim in. And they get moved every day to go and swim in that exhibit. And then in the afternoon, they get brought back down to their main exhibit. And during lockdown, of course, the facility was closed. And what I started doing was we would actually start taking the penguins on different routes that they're not normally used to. So we would take them maybe past the shark exhibit, or we would take them through the ocean exhibit tunnel, so that they could experience these different parts, which is also enriching for them. But what I quickly noticed is if I took one or two of the birds that had a really good relationship with me, they were very comfortable as long as I was in sight. But they would very much stick very close to me. They didn't really want to explore. They were just kind of walking with me. And later on, we then decided to take more of the rockhoppers. So eventually we took all of them. And it was just amazing to see the difference in behavior. And that I can also relate to, like you saying with the giraffe, because it's a group, the whole group of rockhoppers were together and they're all experiencing this together. And obviously there's also, a very positive association with them being in their little colony or their rookery. And there's a lot of confidence and positive relationship in that, and trust in one another, not only in me as the keeper that's now taken into a different environment, but there's more trust because there's other birds that are with them, and they were actually more confident and more willing to explore and investigate things on their own. They weren't so, glued to me wherever I went, which was really amazing to see.
Yeah, it's so important, and that's such a cool behavior. And watching those little guys walk around was a lot of fun. But we could talk for probably days on this topic with so many different situations and opportunities that we had to train those behaviors. But I think what we should do is we should now open this up to our listeners. If they've got any experience with any of the animals that they've been training, and this doesn't mean you have to be in a facility where you are training animals for a zoological facility or an aquarium. It could be your dog or your cat or your bird at home. If you've experienced anything like that,
or your fish, fish at home,
or your fish, you could you could tell us about it. Please contact us, tell us about it, comment in the comments, let us know. And maybe we can even talk about those situations and get to know everybody and all of our listeners, because it's really, really important that we get involved with you guys and you guys get involved with us. And it helps us, get our podcast out there and everybody listening. Because I think one of the biggest things about our podcast is people love those stories, those behind the scenes and those personal stories. Everybody loves listening to those. And that's the best part about listening to a podcast, is listening to those little niche stories that everybody's got, and they're all different and all really interesting, and that's what people really love to listen in our podcast about. So if you guys are interested in getting involved and chatting to us, we are on all the social media platforms. There's Instagram, there's Facebook, we're even on LinkedIn. Please feel free to contact us there. We also have an email address, that's animal.talk201@gmail.com. And you also can go onto our YouTube channel, and please don't forget to subscribe, like, make sure you get the notifications, and you can comment there and tell us a little bit more about those experiences. And we'll be very happy to chat to you there, let everybody know. And then we can bring it up on our podcast as well. So it's really exciting. So please don't forget to subscribe, Like, comment. We love to hear from you guys.
Yeah, I think, Ryan, you touched on something there as well. There's this big misconception that you can only contribute if you work in a zoo or an aquarium setting. But, there's so much animal training and behavior stuff that happens literally in your own home. So as Ryan said, if there's any stories that you want to share with us, any input you want to give, any suggestions you also have about the podcast or topics that you want us to elaborate and talk more on, maybe there's something in this podcast that you want to know more about, please reach out to us. Ryan's given you all the social media platforms. And just make contact with us and let us know what you think, because any feedback is always more than welcome. And we also want to know, even if you enjoy the podcast, let us know so that we can get some feedback, because that's always great.
And we love good feedback and bad feedback. If you want to give us bad feedback, give us bad feedback. We'll love it, because that means we can grow and we can always change our podcast and try and make it better for everybody that's listening. So please give us feedback. Let us know exactly how you feel about our podcast. And also remember to keep safe. And remember, animals are our passion.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Don't forget to go and subscribe and like our various social media pages. And remember that our quality of care is always their quality of life. Cheers, everyone.
Bye. Oh my goodness me.
You're sounding old there.
Oh, you have no idea. Over the last 2 days, I've been like, oh my God, if I get any older, I'm going to sound worse.
I might have to look for a new co-host.